They say success can make you feel invincible, until life reminds you how fragile it all really is. For years, she lived what many would call the dream. A corner office, designer heels clicking across polished marble floors, and her name printed proudly on glossy corporate brochures. Her mornings began with lattes from her favorite cafe, and her evenings ended on the balcony of her high-rise apartment, city lights glimmering like diamonds below. At 34, she was a senior marketing executive for one of the biggest firms in Chicago. Smart. Unstoppable. Her coworkers admired her confidence, her ability to stay calm under pressure. Her boss often said, "If I could clone her, I would." And her fiancé, a handsome architect named Daniel, would smile proudly at company events, introducing her as the most brilliant woman I know. Everything seemed perfect. Success. Stability. But sometimes, when life looks too perfect, it's because a storm is quietly gathering just beyond the horizon. It all started with a single email, one she didn't think much about. A client requested her digital approval for a new account. Doing stuff. She signed off and moved on. But that email, that one click, would change her entire life. A few weeks later, whispers began circulating in the office. Talk of discrepancies, missing funds, and fake invoices. At first, she ignored them. Corporate drama, she thought. Until one morning her boss called her into his office. He wasn't smiling this time. "Did you approve these transactions?" he asked, sliding a folder across the desk. She flipped through the papers, her initials, her signature. Her stomach dropped. I don't remember signing these," she stammered. But the decision had already been made. The company was under investigation, and she was the convenient scapegoat. Within 48 hours, she was escorted out of the building she once ran. Her ID card deactivated. Her reputation gone. She called Daniel, her voice shaking. "They fired me, but I didn't do anything wrong." He hesitated. "I know, but this looks bad, babe. My firm's watching everything right now. Maybe we should take a little space." And just like that, the man she thought would stand beside her through anything quietly stepped away. Her friends stopped calling. Recruiters said they'd get back to her. And her savings, meant for her wedding, started to vanish under lawyer fees and rent. The woman who once walked with confidence through glass doors now stared at her own reflection, wondering how it all went so wrong, so fast. She thought she had hit rock bottom, but life was just getting started with its lessons. Because the real fall hadn't even begun yet. When she loses everything, including the roof over her head, she'll discover that sometimes you have to break completely before you can rebuild stronger. When you lose your job, it feels like losing a part of your identity. But when you lose everything, it feels like losing yourself. The days turned into weeks, and the woman who once woke up to alarm clocks and conference calls now woke up to silence. Her apartment, once filled with the smell of fresh coffee and scented candles, grew emptier with every passing day. The eviction notice came on a Thursday. Just a plain white paper taped to her door, but its message hit harder than any betrayal. She stared at it, trembling, reading the words again and again: failure to pay rent, eviction in 7 days. She tried to negotiate, begged her landlord for more time. But he shook his head gently. "I'm sorry, you've always been a good tenant, but I have bills too." A week later, she was outside, clutching a single duffel bag. Her once pristine designer coat was now soaked through. The city she once ruled from a glass tower now looked different, colder, harsher. She sat under a bus stop awning as rain poured down, watching strangers hurry past. No one looked at her twice. For a while, she slept in her car, telling herself it was temporary. "Just until I get back on my feet," she whispered each night. But one morning, she woke up to find a bright orange sticker on the windshield: vehicle repossession notice. By the time the tow truck pulled away, she couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She wandered aimlessly through the streets, trying to make sense of how everything had fallen apart so fast. There were nights she slept on park benches, clutching her bag to her chest. Days when she skipped meals so she could afford a bus ride to a job interview, only to be told, "We've decided to move forward with another candidate." Her reflection in store windows no longer looked familiar. Her hair was tangled, her eyes tired, her once bright smile replaced by exhaustion. People she used to have lunch meetings with crossed the street when they saw her. Pretending they didn't recognize her wasn't hard. She barely recognized herself anymore. But amidst the darkness, one person did notice her. An elderly woman at a soup kitchen, short, kind eyes, always humming gospel tunes while serving food. "Come sit, dear," she said one evening, sliding a tray toward her. "You look like you haven't eaten in days." The woman hesitated, pride fighting hunger, but hunger won. She sat down, whispered a quiet "thank you," and took her first warm meal in what felt like forever. That simple act of kindness cracked something open inside her, something she didn't know still existed: hope. Night after night, she returned to that soup kitchen. And though she didn't talk much, the elderly woman, whose name was Mrs. Carter, would always smile and say, "Remember, baby, storms don't last forever." But at that moment, sitting on a cold shelter cot, she couldn't see past the storm. She was lost, broken, and scared. And yet, deep down, a quiet voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. She didn't know it yet, but the pain she was feeling was shaping her into the person she was meant to become. When she finally looks in the mirror and decides she's had enough of surviving, she'll discover a spark that even the darkest night couldn't put out. Because sometimes, the road back to yourself begins with one small act of kindness and a choice to keep going. When you've lost everything, even the smallest glimmer of hope can feel like a miracle. Days turned into weeks, and she had learned to survive one day at a time. One meal, one shelter bed, one act of grace at a time. But survival wasn't living. And deep down, she knew she couldn't keep drifting forever. One cold morning, she found herself sitting alone on a park bench. The city was waking up, commuters rushing past, coffee cups in hand, car horns echoing in the distance. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and watched a group of kids chase each other across the playground, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. Something about that laughter struck her. It reminded her of the woman she used to be, full of ideas, energy, and ambition. She remembered her dreams before the corporate world consumed her, before the endless meetings, before the fear of failure. She used to talk about starting a foundation to help women rebuild their lives. Women who had lost everything, just like she had now. She had the plans, the pitch, the passion, and then life got in the way. Now, sitting there hungry and cold, that old dream came rushing back like a whisper from her past. What if this is your second chance? Tears welled in her eyes as she realized she didn't want to be a victim anymore. She wanted to fight back. That evening, when she returned to the soup kitchen, Mrs. Carter greeted her with the same warm smile. "You look like you've been thinking," the old woman said. She nodded. "I don't want this to be my story. Not how it ends." Mrs. Carter chuckled softly. "Then don't let it. You can start writing a new one anytime you decide to." That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, replaying those words again and again. Start writing a new one. The next morning, she approached Mrs. Carter again. "I want to help," she said. "In the kitchen, the pantry, wherever you need me." Mrs. Carter's smile grew wider. "Now that's the spirit I've been waiting to see. Come on, let's get you an apron." And that's how it started, one small act of giving back. She swept floors, washed dishes, served meals. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave her something she hadn't felt in months: purpose. The other volunteers started to notice her work ethic, her kindness, her quiet determination. Days turned into weeks, and soon she wasn't just cleaning tables. She was organizing donation drives, writing thank you notes to sponsors, helping coordinate events. And she was good at it. It was as if all the skills she'd built in her corporate life, management, communication, leadership, were finally being used for something that mattered. One afternoon, as she was helping set up for a fundraiser, a man approached her, middle-aged, kind eyes, clipboard in hand. "Are you the one who's been helping with the donor outreach?" he asked. She nodded shyly. "Yes, sir. Just doing what I can." He smiled. "You're doing more than that. I'm Tom, director of the community center. We could really use someone like you, part-time, for now, if you're interested." Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a glamorous title, and the pay was modest, but it was a beginning. "Thank you," she said softly, tears in her eyes. "You have no idea how much this means to me." And for the first time in months, she walked home, not to a park bench, but to a shelter bunk, with a smile on her face. It wasn't the life she once had, but it was a life she was proud to be rebuilding. What she didn't know was that her next act of kindness would change everything, not just for herself, but for hundreds of people who'd soon be inspired by her story. When her small steps toward redemption catch the attention of the entire city, she'll learn that sometimes your lowest point becomes the foundation for your greatest rise. Sometimes the world tests you not to destroy you, but to reveal the strength you never knew you had. Months passed, and life slowly began to take shape again. Her mornings no longer began with dread, they began with purpose. At the community center, she found herself surrounded by people who weren't just broken, but trying to heal, to rebuild, to hope again. And in helping them, she found herself healing too. She poured everything she had into her work, organizing food drives, managing donations, teaching women how to build resumes and apply for jobs. The same woman who once led corporate campaigns now led with heart. One afternoon, the director, Tom, called her into his office. "I've been looking at the numbers," he said, smiling. "Ever since you joined, our donations have doubled. How are you doing it?" She laughed softly. "I just started telling people stories. Real stories. People connect with that." Tom leaned forward. "You know, we could use someone like you to run our outreach programs full-time. What do you say?" Her eyes widened. "Full-time?" He nodded. "You've earned it." For a moment, she couldn't even find the words. After everything she'd lost, her job, her home, her dignity, this simple offer felt like redemption. "Thank you," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "I won't let you down." But she didn't stop there. Using her marketing background, she came up with an idea, a storytelling campaign for the shelter. She gathered photos, testimonies, and short videos of people rebuilding their lives through the center's help. She titled it New Beginnings. When they launched the campaign online, it didn't just reach donors, it touched hearts. People shared it everywhere. Local influencers, news outlets, even old colleagues who once ignored her messages. Within a week, the donations skyrocketed. Within a month, national networks were calling to feature her story. A journalist asked her during an interview, "How did you go from a homeless shelter to leading a movement?" She smiled humbly. "By realizing success isn't about what you have. It's about what you give." Soon, she was standing on stage at a charity gala, the same kind of event she once attended as a guest, but this time, she wasn't there for herself. She was there to represent the people she served. The crowd gave her a standing ovation as she shared her story, not the glamorous parts, but the broken ones, the painful ones, the human ones. She ended her speech with a line that made everyone rise to their feet. "Sometimes, when life takes everything from you, it's not to punish you, it's to prepare you for something greater." And as fate would have it, one evening she received a letter, an official one, from her former company. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was an apology. The real culprits behind the fraud had finally been found. Her name was cleared. They offered her a public statement of exoneration, and even a chance to return. She sat there for a long time, staring at the letter. For years, she'd dreamed of this moment, the day she could prove her innocence. But now, something had changed. She didn't feel angry anymore. She didn't need revenge. She had already won, not in the boardroom, but in life. She folded the letter gently and whispered, "I forgive you." She had rebuilt not just her career, but her soul. And her story was far from over. When she finally steps onto a stage to share her journey with hundreds of women just like her, she'll deliver a message so powerful it will remind us all that sometimes, losing everything is how you find yourself. Life has a way of taking us through fire to reveal what we're truly made of. And for her, the woman who once lost everything, that fire became the very thing that shaped her strength. A year had passed since she first walked through the doors of that soup kitchen, cold, hungry, and hopeless. Now, she stood backstage at a women's empowerment conference, holding a microphone, dressed in a simple but elegant cream-colored dress. Her palms were sweaty. Her heart raced. But when she looked out from behind the curtain and saw hundreds of faces, women of all ages, each carrying their own silent battles, something inside her calmed. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The applause was immediate, warm, genuine. But she raised a hand and smiled softly. "Please," she said, "you don't need to clap for me. Clap for yourselves, for showing up today, for not giving up even when it hurts." She looked out at the crowd and began to speak, her voice steady but full of emotion. "There was a time," she said, "when I thought success meant expensive shoes, glass offices, and a big paycheck. But when I lost all of that, I learned something more powerful than any degree or promotion could ever teach me." The room fell silent. "I learned that strength isn't about how high you climb, it's about how many times you rise after falling." She paused, her eyes glistening under the stage lights. "I was once homeless. I was hungry. I was ashamed. But one act of kindness, one stranger who didn't look away, changed everything. It reminded me that even in the darkest places, there's still light." People in the audience began wiping away tears. She continued, her voice growing stronger. "Today, I stand here not as a victim, but as a survivor. Because sometimes, losing everything is how you find who you truly are." A wave of applause filled the room, not polite applause, but the kind that comes from the heart. Women stood up, clapping, crying, nodding, some seeing themselves in her, some finding hope in her words. After the event, several women came up to her, thanking her for sharing her story. One of them, a young mother, said softly, "I was about to give up. But hearing you made me believe I can start over too." She hugged her and whispered, "You can. We all can." Later that evening, as she walked home beneath the setting sun, the city lights flickered around her, the same city that had once turned its back on her, now glowing like it was welcoming her home. She passed by her old office building. For a moment she stopped and looked up at it. The tall glass tower reflected the orange hues of dusk, just as it had years ago. But she didn't feel bitterness. Just gratitude. Because she finally understood, life had never taken anything from her. It had given her a second chance to find her true self. Today, she continues to work at the community center, helping women rebuild their lives, just as she rebuilt hers. And every time she tells her story, she reminds them, you are stronger than you think. You are braver than you believe. And sometimes, losing everything is how you gain what truly matters. Because in the end, it wasn't her fall that defined her, it was the courage to rise again. And that's something no one can ever take away. Moral of this story, even when life takes everything away, your strength, kindness, and purpose can rebuild a future brighter than before. In life, we all fall. We all face moments when everything we've built seems to crumble overnight. But what truly defines us isn't the fall, it's the rise. Because every setback, every heartbreak, every loss is shaping you for something greater. And sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters: kindness, purpose, strength. So if you're watching this and you feel like you've lost it all, remember her story. Remember that you still have the power to start again. You still have the strength to rise. Because in the end, rock bottom isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of your comeback. And hey, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Cherished Stories channel for more inspiring stories just like this one. Because every story we tell is a reminder that no matter how dark it gets, there's always a light waiting for you to rise again. And remember, we're not just telling stories. We're changing lives.